I've been having an internal conversation that last week spilled out because I'm just like, I'm sick of it. I'm sick of it. Every semester, I tell my journalism students, I don't know, I'm preparing you for a world that doesn't exist, meaning I'm going to give you all of the skills, but when you go out there, nobody's going to require you to have these skills.
Or
there are
we'll
no
hire
editors
you for them.
Period. Right. There are no editors that are going to challenge you. Very few editors that are equipped to actually train you. And you just basically can do whatever the hell you want, including start a sentence with a numeral. I've seen it. That said, I tweeted. I know. I tweeted because some PR person referred to herself as an opinion journalist. And I was like, what the hell is that? So I tweeted, I just saw someone describe themselves as an opinion journalist. Isn't that an oxymoron? Because I like to ask questions. I'm Socratic, even though I know the answer. So I said that. I said, isn't that an oxymoron? And then I went on to tweet, you're either a journalist, one who gathers news/facts and disseminates to the public, or you're a columnist, one who gives your opinion on news topics. Good journalists make good columnists. And I know because I was both. And then I got people coming out of left field. And I'm gonna say this really loudly, without the training. And I don't care. You could have started when you were 12, but you didn't do this at this level. No. Number one, go and tell me I'm wrong. I'm like, I wanted to have a fight on Twitter, Brian Karem, but this is how we got into this problem. You do not fight with people on Twitter. This is not the forum for that. So I let them talk. I clapped back a couple of times, dropped a Pulitzer or poke here or there, and I've been teaching this for 22 years now. And I'm like, sit down somewhere, because what you do is not journalism either.
Well,
so I'm not saying you. I'm saying the person.
I know what you're saying.
Oh my God.
It drives me nuts, because it's like, I ask people all the time, would you walk into an operating theater and tell the brain surgeon, look, I know you've studied this and done this for 20, 25 years, but I just saw a video on YouTube. Let me tell you how to really do it. But everybody thinks you can do that with journalism, and they don't have a clue what journalism is. And you're absolutely right. There's opinion writers, columnists, which I do for salon.com, and which I do, for other publications, and I did for Playboy. And then there's journalism. And I ran 2 newspapers for 14 years. And I would oftentimes have young reporters come to me and say, hey, this is what I think. And I would tell them, I don't care what you think. I barely care what I think. What do you know? That's what a journalist does, is go out and vet facts and presents them to the community, so then we can all make a decision based on common vetted facts. It's quickly disappearing. There are major newspapers today that don't even have copy editors. And
oh my God.
Yeah. That starting with the numeral thing, you just struck a dagger into my heart. It's, it's one of the things people go, well, you're just you're being old and fussy. And I go, no, there's an idea of uniformity in the language that allows us to communicate more thoroughly and better with each other. That's the idea of a copy editor. That's why you have standards, so that we can all communicate from the same page. And that's not something that we should dismiss. And unfortunately, it's become harder and harder to do, because there are fewer and fewer jobs available for us. They're hiring people cheaper and cheaper. The constriction in this business is absolutely disgusting. It all began with Richard Nixon and Roger Ailes, and then it was implemented by Ronald Reagan. And when we began allowing companies to buy each other up and gobble each other up, there became fewer and fewer actual reporters out there, and they were hired for cheaper and cheaper. Today, you can go and cover the White House, Karen, straight out of college. There are people that are getting hired.
That should even, I remember Helen Thomas. So let me go all the way back, because as you're talking, there are people who think because they are able to show up at a place and interview some people, and there's 2 things that makes them a and there are 2 things going on right now, because I will absolutely say that young lady that held up that phone while George Floyd was having the life snuffed out of him under Derek Chauvin's knee was in a way a journalist, because
that was an act of journalism.
That was an act of journalism. Right. Absolutely.
She wasn't commenting. She just recorded the events for all of us to see. That's the base. You have a front line, you're on the front row of history, and it's your responsibility to record and send the facts to everyone else to be seen. Yes, that was an act of journalism, a great act of journalism. And I believe she was rewarded for that. She got a special
Pulitzer, I believe.
Yeah, for that. I teach that among all my young reporters, and I want them to understand what it is that we actually do. I don't think you can call yourself a reporter. Well, the joke used to be that the difference between a journalist and a reporter is that a journalist was an out-of-work reporter, but there's no, the difference between a reporter and just someone spouting their opinion. You at least have a copy editor, someone to vet your copy and go, what is this? What is that? Why is that spelled that way? Where did you get this information? Someone to question you before you put it in print.
Yes.
And look, it's, it was Ben Bagdickian from the Washington Post who years ago said we need a diversity in our newsroom, but we're not going to get the diversity without a diversity of ownership. And it's not just a diversity in age and sex and race and creed and religion. It's a diversity of thought, but we don't have that today. 95%, I think it is, of what you see, read, or hear is owned by 5 companies. And I guarantee you those companies are not left-leaning liberals. The bias in journalism today is towards money. We have tethered journalism to profit. So what we get for journalism today is what we want to read or see or hear instead of what we need to read, see, or hear. And so it's become entertainment, and it's not journalism for the most part.
Free to press. I don't know how we do that, how we revive it when that is the edict. And I remember being at the Daily News on the editorial board when Colin Powell's son was the head of the FCC. I remember when Mort Zuckerman bought the New York Daily News. Yeah. I'm getting him confused with the guy that bought
Zuckerberg.
Anyway, yes. But I remember when he bought the New York Daily News, and I was like, why? First, it was, the other mogul that ended up Maxwell in the ocean. And then shortly thereafter was this Canadian real estate mogul buying the Daily News. And I was like, what does he know about journalism? And I'm in my 20s, and I'm like, I don't understand. And then the FCC, allows for Rupert Murdoch to have a TV station, a radio station, and a newspaper in the same market.
That's in the book. You're absolutely right.
That was the problem. That's the ground zero.
Nixon and Reagan. And when Reagan lowered the guardrails and allowed us to buy each other up, you end up with like Sinclair, who owns 30 or 100 markets. I don't know what they own, but a bunch of them. You used to limit the ownership to like 4 or 5. And in the 80s, newspapers and television stations got together and lobbied Congress to limit the ownership of newspapers to 20 and the ownership to, I think, 4 of television. And instead, what we got, and we got this in 1996 with the Telecommunications Act, the further lowering of standards so that radio stations, so iHeartRadio owns everything in every market. You began with just a mere handful of companies owning everything. And look, here's how it works. If you own, say, 1 newspaper and you end up owning 30 newspapers, those 30 newspapers all used to send reporters to the State House, to Washington, D.C., to different bureaus. Well, now you can pool your resources. You need fewer reporters to cover what it used to take 30 reporters to cover. You might cover it with 4 or 5. And the problem with that is, while it increases the bottom line for the board members, at the same time, you're depressing the price for reporters. So you're getting cheaper reporters and you're getting fewer of them. And I always use as an example, Laredo, Texas. When I worked there in 1984, there were 100,000 people in that town. There were 2 daily newspapers in English, 2 daily newspapers in Spanish. There were 3 television stations in English. There was 2 in Spanish that all provided news, and like 3 or 4 radio stations that did. Today, in 2022, there are 300,000 people in Laredo instead of 100,000, 3 times the number of people. There is 1 newspaper, 1 television station. That's the problem, because we've allowed vulture capitalists like the Alden Group to go through and buy several hundred newspapers. They close them all down. So there's a whole information desert in communities all across this country. And nationally, what you end up with is what sells best. And that's not news.
But that's our fault too, right? And some of
Well,
it,
it's
yes
our
and no.
fault for not
Let's
fighting back. Yeah.
let's talk about it. 866-801-8255. Brian J. Karem is here. The book is called Free the Press. And I want to shout out Darnella Frazier because I have to say her name. That's the young lady who recorded, who was 17 when she recorded George
Yes.
Floyd's murder and put it out for the rest of us. And Pulitzer did honor her for doing that. That said, we curate what we watch. We curate the news that we get. Most of my students don't read a newspaper. I used to require that they had to at least read a newspaper for my class every day, and I would quiz them, and I mean it was a lot. And I realized I was fighting a losing battle because they get their news from their phone.
And you know why they're not newspapers anymore? It's not because newspapers aren't viable. That's one of the big arguments. It's not viable. Newspapers are very viable, and here's why. You can't hack a newspaper. You can hack a phone, you can hack the internet, you can change it. It's ephemeral, but the newspaper is finite. I've got copies of newspapers that are 150 years in my house. It says the same thing today as it said it was on the day that it was printed. And that's valuable for history. And they are needed, but we haven't supported them at the state, local, and federal level. One of the biggest untold stories that I talk about in this book is how they've gotten rid of public service ads. Those public notice ads that tell you, when the estate sales are, or when the county council meeting is, all of those things, when the PTA meeting is, lawyers and doctors and salesmen would see those, find who were in their community. It helped build a community. Not only that, it made local governments responsible to the people. That was a big role in transparency. Well, in a money-saving effort, they've gotten rid of them and allow newspapers not to publish them anymore. And they're on websites now for the government. Well, that kills the profit margins of many small newspapers, many community newspapers, and that's destroying journalism. We've got to build from the bottom up. We need to give, we desperately need to give tax breaks, low interest loans to small community newspapers. And then, speaking about your newspaper, Karen, why not give everybody $100 rebate on their taxes every year if they just subscribe to a newspaper? That would help immensely.
That is easy. And I think about all of the local Black newspapers, like the ones that, all gone or not, not viable in the sense that they don't have real journalists. I recently, a couple of years ago, I was interviewed by one of the papers, and the owner sent her like 18-year-old daughter to interview me. And I was like, really? She didn't know what to ask. And I was like, listen, and, I'm trying to teach her. She went back to her mother and said I was mean to her. And, I was like, you don't send an 18-year-old to interview. What the hell?
Yeah.
What are you doing?
Without some training, at least.
Yeah. What is this? What she didn't know what to add. I'm like, what is this? What we're doing? But there's no money though. There's no money.
I would not let my kids, thank God, did not go into my line of work, but I wouldn't recommend it for young people today because it's at some point in time you've got to pay your bills. There are reporters at the White House who have just gotten out of college, who are making $35,000 to $40,000 a year. How do you survive on that in Washington, D.C.? It's daggone near impossible. And that makes the reporters corporate slaves, is what it amounts to. And in addition, you've got a White House who's selling access. So you don't want to anger the White House and then get cut out.
Wait. You just said something, Brian Karem. What do you mean a White House that's selling access?
All White Houses leverage reporters. Oh, you want to be on Air Force One? Oh, you want to be in the pool? Oh, you want to do this? Are you with the right group? Are you with the right? First of all, you got to be with the right newspaper, the correct news, one of those that they.
So we the people aren't just getting news from good journalists. They are curating who gets to have access. So in essence, they're curating the news that we actually get from that.
Of course.
From the White House.
And that's, they have you fighting over seats in the Brady briefing room. I think that's one of the most hilarious things. They're going, Brian, don't you want to? I go, no, I don't want to sit down like I'm in school. I'll stand up in the aisle and look somebody in the eye as an adult. I don't need to be sitting in a seat waving like, oh, please look at me, teacher. It's that, look, we're the press. We should be holding them accountable for what they do, not playing their games at access and being allowed to ask a question. They're going, how, you know, I had someone give me grief because I would ask a question, you know, and would shout the question sometimes. How can you be rude like that? I go, no, that's not rude. That's my job. I'm doing my job. I'm trying to hold them accountable. If they don't want to call on me, I'm not in any way obliged to fall into, you know, into that relationship where they're the master and I'm the servant, not doing it.
So how do we fix this? I've been dealing with this group. They're called Presto. They're teaching fifth graders how to become journalists, and I was like, okay, I'm going to invest.
Curious
in
minds and a lot of questions at that age.
Yeah.
We always attract those people. That journalism is great, and it's one of the reasons why you and I got involved. Is you're curious, you want to know things. I always wanted to travel the world on somebody else's nickel too, because, you know, I couldn't afford it otherwise. So that's nice. But we don't do that much anymore. We do everything on video or through Zoom, and that's no way to be a reporter. You need to be there and see things for yourself. You need to be a primary source, not a tertiary or secondary source. And how you fix it, there's a lot of ways. First of all, support community journalism. That's where it starts at the ground up. Then you need to support a shield law so that reporters don't go to jail if they have confidential sources, and governments can't therefore leverage them and pressure them into giving up their sources, because that leads us to doing nothing but propaganda. And then you also need to reinstitute, I think, the fairness doctrine, or at least put together a group of people, journalists and owners, to decide how to implement a fairness doctrine so we get out of our informational silos, and Fox News and others are required to give a differing opinion or actual facts in their case. And then you've got to bust up the media monopolies. And that's the most controversial thing, because no large media company wants to have that, you know, that monolithic power broken up. But unfortunately, there are media companies today that have more power than some nations. And that's in their ability to get the word out. And that's frightening on many regards. And we should all be wary of that. And when you bust up media monopolies, you put more reporters out in the field. And that's the end game, is to have many more voices available and as diverse as possible in order to make sure that everyone has a seat at the table, everyone is asking questions, and answers are provided.
But all right, the first one, we can all do it, but I don't think we will. It's just, you know,
I think it's a hard ask all the way around.
I mean, and it shouldn't be, you know, it shouldn't be, but at the same time, we want we want everything quick and fast, and we want it on our phone. And if you're not digital, you're right. I was, you know, having this conversation, like, what happens when they hack everything? They already want to ban books, you know, and if everything is digital, it's just a flip of a button and you have no access to anything.
Exactly.
So what happens then? And are we okay with that? And I feel like ignorance is bliss for a lot of us, where what we don't know, we're okay with. But the erosion in society because of this lack of knowledge is now prevalent in the midst of a pandemic. You just talked about people, Nicki Minaj's cousin's left testicle became more valid an argument than something coming out of Dr. Fauci's mouth, right? Yeah. Somebody that actually has a medical degree. And it's like, how are we listening to Nicki Minaj over Dr. How are we listening to Joe Rogan?
I won't listen to him, but you're right.
But 11 million people are.
That's in
Brian.
Look, we have destroyed our credibility. Large businesses and the government have been complicit. And again, I blame Ronald Reagan for a great deal of this, because he started us down this path, and he set the table, and every other president ate from the table. And we've come to the idea that this is normal, and it's not. It shouldn't be looked upon as normal. It shouldn't be regarded as normal. It isn't normal. Those politicians work for us. If we have every right to question them at any time, and they have all conspired to limit us access and limit information. And when you do that, look, nature abhors a vacuum. So if you're not getting vetted facts, you're getting fiction, and and lies. And I'm sorry, there's no alternate facts. There's only facts and lies. And when you're not able to vet facts, then anything that's on the internet is glom, they oh wow, let's grab that, and that's a fact. And that's a problem. And it's going to be a problem until we do something about it. And if we don't do something about it, we're doomed to fascism.